Do you have that one friend who seems to know an insufferable amount about a lot of random subjects? The person who chimes in with the odd and sometimes highly disturbing fun fact. Well, my name is Carly, and I am that friend. I often find myself wondering about topics that range from the history of certain holidays to what makes some wines expensive and some a little on the cheaper side. So I make use of that mini supercomputer I carry everywhere and just look it up. Lately, I have decided to share the random knowledge that I acquire with all of you lovely listeners. So welcome to I'm Already Looking It Up. Let's have a drink and learn a thing or two. Hello. You're listening to I'm Already Looking It Up, the podcast where I, your host, research a random topic and tell you, my lovely listeners, all about it. So without further ado, let's get started. So today, our topic is accidental inventions. Because my family is odd, and a lot of my oddness comes from my family, which is fine. We're great. But my mom used to say that my brother Aaron, who is a very kind of odd person in general, but we love him, so it's okay, will one day be the type of person who invents something accidentally. Just like the guy who invented, Post-its. So, there you go. Anyway, this is a topic that we like to talk about often because it's fun to think of the things that, we are so important in our society today that we don't think about, like, who came up with this? And I think it's kind of cool. So let's kind of look at, I have a couple of lists and some articles to talk about a few accidental inventions. So the first one on my list is penicillin, the world's first antibiotic, which has prevented millions of deaths from infection and disease, was the accidental byproduct of a messy workspace. Alexander Fleming, a bacteriologist in London, returned from a vacation in 1928 to discover that one of his petri dishes in his lab had mold growing on it, the result of unintended contamination. On closer inspection, he saw that the area around the mold was free from bacteria. Fleming named his bacteria-killing mold juice penicillin after the species of fungus Penicillium notatum and published a paper about his discovery in 1929. However, he wasn't sure if it had any practical use, as it was difficult to purify and stabilize. A decade later, chemists at Oxford University read Fleming's paper, took up the project of turning penicillin into viable medicine. It was first tested on a patient in 1940, and widespread use began in 1942. Today, penicillin is the most commonly used antibiotic in the world. So there you go. Sometimes things happen, and usually bad things come out of accidents like that, but sometimes good things. All right, so smoke detectors are the next thing. Smoke detectors are so commonplace in homes and businesses that they're easy to overlook. But their invention has saved millions of lives, and having a working smoke detector in the home decreases the risk of dying in a fire by more than half. For that, you can thank Swiss physicist Walter Jaeger. In the 1930s, Jaeger was trying to invent a sensor that could detect poison gas. Instead, his device registered the smoke from his cigarette, a discovery that led to the invention of the modern smoke detector. Beginning in the 1950s, smoke detectors were installed in industrial spaces, but their high cost prohibited widespread use in homes. Technological advancements greatly reduced the cost in the 1970s, and more than 12 million smoke detectors were sold in 1977. Today, 9 in 10 homes have smoke detectors. I think ours is probably in our hallway, but yeah. So that's pretty neat. Let's see. Velcro, is the next on my list. Swiss engineer George de Maestro didn't set out to invent a fastener that would someday be ubiquitous on spacecraft. But in 1941, he returned from a walk with his dog to notice that they were both covered in tiny barbs of the cocklebur plant. On closer inspection, de Maestro saw that the burrs were shaped like tiny hooks, which snagged on the loops of his clothing and his dog's fur. Fascinated, he began trying to create his own hook and loop fabric, an endeavor that would ultimately take him more than 10 years. In 1955, he patented Velcro, a name that combines the French words velours and crochet, which means velvet and hook. Despite the moniker, de Maestro's creation was made from nylon. It took a while for the fashion world to catch on, but NASA was an early adopter using Velcro on spacesuits and shuttles. In fact, they embraced it so avidly that many people believe Velcro is a NASA invention. Today, Velcro is widely used in designing apparel, healthcare devices, cars, and airplanes. And after decades of research, scientists finally figured out how to make Velcro quieter in 2021. Yo, that's pretty cool. Hold on a minute. Alright, so the next one is dynamite. Many inventors were overjoyed by their accidental discoveries, but not all of them. The unlikely path that led to dynamite horrified one of its creators, who never intended it for its explosive ingredient to be used at all. Nitroglycerin was invented by Italian chemist in 1847, Ascanio Sobrero, I think, who combined glycerol with nitric and sulfuric acids to produce an explosive compound. It was far more powerful than gunpowder and more volatile. Sobrero was opposed to its use, but his lab mate, Alfred Nobel, saw potential for creating profitable explosives and weapons. In 1867, Nobel created dynamite, which stabilized nitroglycerin through the addition of silica powder, though not before blowing up his factories twice in the process. Nobel is best remembered now for the eponymous prize that he established, which recognizes humanitarian contributions, but the wealth that endowed his prize foundation came from selling his patented weapon of war. Of course it did. Sobrero's discovery led to Nobel's creation, something he never intended and deeply regretted. Of his invention, Sobrero said, "When I think of all the victims killed during nitroglycerin explosions and the terrible havoc that has been wreaked, which in all probability will continue to occur in the future, I am almost ashamed to admit to be its discoverer." Oh, that one's kind of sad. I mean, yeah, like, that's fair. Yeah, that's sad. The next one is blood thinner warfarin. Yeah. All right, so I like a lot of these are medicines and pharmacological type things, or like chemistry type things, because, like, you know, in the really early days of science, we just like didn't know what things did, so things like we just kind of did it just to see what would happen, and they discovered some crazy stuff. So yeah, the history of pharmacological innovation is littered with accidental discoveries like Viagra, which was intended for high blood pressure, and Valium, a failed attempt at creating fabric dyes. But warfarin, a common blood thinner, was discovered not in a lab but in a field where livestock were dying from a mysterious disease. In the 1920s, cattle and sheep that grazed on moldy sweet clover hay began to suffer from internal bleeding. Many previously healthy animals also bled to death after simple veterinary procedures. A Canadian veterinarian, Frank Schofield, determined that the moldy hay contained an anticoagulant that was preventing their blood from clotting. In 1940, scientists at the University of Wisconsin, led by biochemist Carl Link, had isolated the anticoagulant compound in the moldy hay. A particularly powerful derivative of the compound was patented as warfarin, named after the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, WARF, that funded its development. But before it was used to treat heart attacks, strokes, and blood clots, warfarin was used as rat poison. In 1948, it was approved for use as a rodenticide. It wasn't until the mid-1950s that warfarin entered clinical use. Among its early patients was President Dwight D. Eisenhower, whose 1955 heart attack was treated with warfarin. There you go. Pretty neat. And that's another thing, is like things that were invented for specific uses also becoming like useful in other situations that nobody expected. Like Viagra was originally intended for heart medication and high blood pressure. Sorry, I had to go back and look at that. And they, now it's a well-known use for erectile dysfunction. So that's kind of cool. That is something kind of common in these. So matches are the next one. According to Charles Darwin, fire was the most significant human achievement after language. And ever since we learned to make fire, humans have been trying to figure out how to improve our process. Prior to the invention of the friction match, fires were commonly made with a flint and steel or fire drill, both of which could be laborious. Early matches relied on chemicals like the Prometheus match, invented in 1829, which contained a glass vial of sulfuric acid wrapped in paper. The match was lit by crushing the glass vial. Darwin himself was a fan of these and would entertain others by biting matches to ignite them. However, as one might imagine, a match that people are tempted to light with their mouths has some safety drawbacks. Around the same time, British pharmacist John Walker was experimenting with chemicals when he accidentally scrapes a coated stick across his hearth. The stick burst into flames, giving Walker an idea. In 1827, he began selling Congraves at his pharmacy, named in honor of the inventor of a type of rocket. Walker's Congraves, I don't know, were cardboard sticks coated in a mixture of potassium chlorate and an antimony sulfide, which would ignite when struck against a piece of sandpaper. Though Walker's invention was instantly popular, he chose not to patent it. As a result, others copied his design and began selling their own versions, obscuring his role as the inventor. It wasn't until long after his death in 1859 that he was acknowledged as the creator of the first friction match. Pretty cool. At least he's acknowledged now. It's interesting though, because like patents are weird and I don't particularly enjoy them. Just because you weren't, you're the first person to say I invented this doesn't mean you were actually the first person to invent it. So I don't like patents. I think they're weird. I think people should just be credited with their discoveries, without having to go through a whole legal process. But I don't run the world, so it's fine. Coca-Cola is the next one. One of the most popular soft drinks in the world, also has one of the most unusual histories. In 1866, an American pharmacist named John Pemberton was trying to create a painkiller. Pemberton had been gravely injured in the Civil War and developed a morphine dependency that he hoped to curb by inventing an effective opiate-free alternative. His first product, which he called Pemberton's French wine coca, contained a few ingredients you won't find in today's recipe. Coca wine, which combined alcohol with leaves from the cocaine-containing coca plant, and cola nuts, which contain stimulating caffeine. His French wine was popular, but when the temperance movement took hold in his home state of Georgia in 1886, he had to develop an alcohol-free alternative. He substituted sugar syrup for wine, and while tinkering with the formula, he accidentally mixed his concoction with carbonated water. After tasting it, he decided to market the beverage as a fountain drink instead of a medication, naming it Coca-Cola after its original ingredient. Unfortunately, Pemberton's health worsened, as did his morphine dependency, and he died in poverty just 2 years after his invention. By then, he had sold his shares to his business partner, Asa Griggs Candler, who turned Coca-Cola into one of the most successful companies in the country. There you go. That is Coca-Cola, how it was invented. Pretty cool. So the next one is the Slinky. We love Slinkies. I love them as fidgets. They're great. So the Slinky. Known for the mesmerizing way in which it descends downstairs, the Slinky was created by naval engineer Richard James, according to the Strong National Museum play. Trying to develop a spring that would keep equipment steady on ships, James knocked the coiled metal off a ledge and saw the incredible effect it had. He showed his wife, Betty, the accidental invention, and she had an idea to make it a toy. And there you go. There's Slinky, short and sweet. Post-it notes, like I mentioned before, post-it notes are an accidental invention, and I think that's pretty cool. So, a scientist named Dr. Spencer Silver was working to develop an incredibly strong adhesive in 1968. By accident, he created the exact opposite, an incredibly weak adhesive. Silver relentlessly shared his invention with colleagues, but he couldn't get traction to make it into a product. One of his colleagues, Arthur Fry, came up with the idea of using the adhesive on bookmarks. Fed up with the little papers falling out of his hymnal at church. He determined that Silver's invention was the solution. They worked on developing a bookmark, and after notes on them, that's a weird one, decided to make the product a new way to communicate. After a successful market test in Idaho, 3M began selling the Post-it note in 1979, and it rapidly grew in popularity. Pretty freaking cool. All right, so the next one is Play-Doh, which we love Play-Doh. According to the Strong National Museum of Play, the classic children's toy began as a household cleaning product. Which is interesting because I know a lot of people have like that car slime that you can like, and I guess they use it for keyboards too, but you can like use it to pick up dust and stuff in your car in places where you can't normally get it. So there you go. According to the Strong National Museum of Play, the classic children's toy began as a household cleaning product. Invented by soap company Coutole Products, the organization was in danger of going out of business in the late 1920s. However, Cleo McVicker secured a contract with Kroger grocery stores to produce a ready-made wallpaper cleaner for their stores. Using water, salt, and flour, the company developed a malleable compound to clean wallpaper. While this kept the company afloat, Coutole Products faced plummeting sales again by the 1950s. McVicker's son, Joseph, was encouraged by his sister-in-law, Kay Zufall, to make the product a toy for children. He visited her classroom to see the designs that the children made with the Coutole Products wallpaper cleaner. He was convinced that this was the right way to pivot. Altering the ingredients to remold the product into a toy, Coutole Products established Rainbow Crafts Company, Inc., to sell Play-Doh. Lacking an advertising budget, McVicker convinced Bob Keeshan, the star of a popular TV show called Captain Kangaroo, to use the product on the show. Play-Doh was launched into the national spotlight, helping it become one of the most popular toys. Pretty cool. I love Play-Doh. I really do. I like squishy things. Alright. So the next one was kind of surprising to me. I don't know why, because I don't really think about how foods are invented a lot. Or at least, I mean, I do and I don't. It just kind of depends on what it is, but I've never thought about this one. So, chocolate chip cookies are the next product. Kenneth and Ruth Graves Wakefield owned and operated the Toll House Inn, a tourist lodge located between Plymouth and Boston, Massachusetts. Excuse me. Cooking and serving all of their food for their guests. Ruth went to bake chocolate cookies for the guests, but she found that she was out of baker's chocolate. To improvise, she chopped up a Nestle semi-sweet baking chocolate bar, thinking that the chocolate would melt and spread into the batter. The chocolate didn't melt into the batter, however, but was just softened. Although it wasn't what she was planning, Ruth served the cookies, and they quickly became a hit. She reached an agreement with Nestle, whose semi-sweet chocolate bar sales were growing rapidly. The company was allowed to print the Toll House cookie recipe on their package, while supplying Ruth with all the chocolate she needed. Sounds like a sweet deal. After trying to make the bars easier to cut, Nestle transformed the product by making bags of semi-sweet chocolate morsels, chocolate chips, in 1939. That is so cool, because, I know that it's quite normal for people to use the chocolate chip recipe on the back of the Nestle bags. Didn't know it was original. That's the recipe. That is the chocolate chip cookie recipe. Personally, I like to make cookies from cake batter because they're so soft and delicious, but my husband can make some pretty good soft chocolate chip cookies that are just so good. Love them. And I am not a sweets person, but man, that man can bake, and I'm here for it. Super glue is the next one, another adhesive product. Dr. Harry Coover was working on a research team at Eastman Kodak to develop clear plastics that could form precision sights for the U.S. military guns during World War II. The team unintentionally found a chemical compound that was incredibly sticky, but they disregarded it because it had no use for the gun sights. In 1951, Coover was leading a project for the same company. This time, he and his team were looking to develop a clear and heat-proof material for jet plane canopies. One of the research students, ironically named Fred Joyner, rediscovered the same formula Coover found in 1942. After testing the product, it was deemed a successful solution. Coover finally brought that discovery to the attention of the company, which first sold the product in 1958. It was a life-saving tool during the Vietnam War. U.S. soldiers used the glue to seal the wounds of injured soldiers. Neat. That is cool. That is one I kind of knew because someone brought it up once, and I was like, no, that's not real. And I looked it up, and I was like, oh, shit, yeah, it is. There you go. All right. So the next one is popsicles, which I would not have thought of popsicles being an accidental invention. But once again, I don't really think about food. I bet a lot of food is accidental, even just messing around in the kitchen. So, I don't know. So the popsicle. Fittingly, an 11-year-old boy invented this cherished children's treat. In 1905, Frank Epperson was going to make his own soda, filling a cup with powdered soda and water and putting a stirring stick in it. Leaving the concoction outside overnight, the soda froze to become the very first popsicle. Nearly 20 years later, after successfully serving the frozen treats at a ball and an amusement park, Epperson received a patent for the popsicle. First called the Epsicle, Epperson's children began calling it Popsicle. Oh, that's cute. Leading to the famous popsicle. He sold the patent to the Joe Low Company in New York, which expanded the flavors. That's adorable. I didn't know that's why it was like called an actual popsicle. That's neat. Always wondered though. I always like to wonder about like brand names and where they come from, because those are interesting too. Maybe I'll have to do an episode on that or something, or like why we name things the way we do, because naming things is so weird. I actually listen a lot to, I think I brought this up in my last episode about Bigfoot, but I listen a lot to a podcast called Ologies. I actually just started listening to it, but I'm really listening to it. And one of the episodes I just listened to was the ichthyologist episode, which, if you don't know, ichthyology is the study of fish. Anyone who plays Animal Crossing should know that, because you get a bad thing for ichthyology. But anyway, so they were talking about naming fish and species of fish and everything, which is such a cool thing to think about, like that you got to name a species of something. But I honestly think if you name anything that goes into like an invention or anything like that, that's still neat. So the ologist that Allie Ward, the host, had on was talking about, Allie had asked her, have you gotten to name any fish? And she's like, oh yeah, I named several fish. And then they talked about naming fish after yourself, which is apparently super frowned on in the ichthyologist community. I don't know about other science communities. And I thought that was really funny that, like, they were saying how, like, oh, you can name it after, like, a colleague, you can name it after whatever, just don't name it after yourself, because that's, like, a douche move to do. So I thought that was cool. The ichthyologist who was on the episode, I don't remember her name, but she did say that, like, yeah, I have a couple fish named after me by, like, colleagues, but I don't name them after myself. And I was like, that's kind of cool, like, that's, like, a very frowned upon thing, because a lot of inventions and stuff are named after their creators. So there you go. All right. The next one, potato chips, which again is another food. I love the food ones, actually. Starting to enjoy them a lot. They're fun. One of the most popular snack foods, the potato chip, was invented in 1853 by George Crumb. Yeah, his last name is Crumb. A chef that... I wonder why we call them crumbs. I don't know. Anyway, a chef at the Moon Lake Lodge Resort in Saratoga Lake, New York, when one of his customers complained that their French fried potatoes were too thick and mushy. As legend has it, a spec solution was to thinly slice and fry some potatoes until brown, and the patrons loved what was to become the first ever batch of chips. Well, there you go, potato chips. I personally love potato chips. I prefer Lay's. I don't know what it is about, like, the Lay's, the one that comes in, like, the yellow bag, the originals. Oh, but I love those. They're so good. I think it's probably just all the salt. Like, I'm a big, I find my palate is changing a lot, but, usually I'm a huge, like, I love salty and savory foods. So, like, my favorite snack is popcorn. I love bacon. Actually, my brother sent me a recipe for bacon popcorn the other day, and I was like, ooh, I should try that, because that sounds real good. But yeah, I'm usually a salty, savory type person, so I guess it makes sense. I like potato chips. I like French fries. I like anything potatoes, usually, except for sweet potatoes, which are not sweet potatoes. So yeah, I love it. They're great. All right. Sorry, just need to take a drink there. All right, so Teflon is the next one, which I saw this and I was like, oh, I have to know what this is, because there's a line in the song Beautiful from the Heathers musical, where Veronica, the main character, calls the three Heathers solid Teflon, and I actually didn't know what that was. And I never thought to look it up, so I was glad this was on one of the lists I looked at, because I was like, oh, I don't even know what Teflon is. So, there you go. You might not recognize it by name, but Teflon is a synthetic polymer used to make everything from non-stick cooking pans to nail polish, And though it's a genius invention that changed the way we cook, clean, and groom ourselves, the man who discovered the product, Roy J. Plunkett, did so completely by accident. The scientist was working at the DuPont company's Jackson Laboratory in 1938, researching refrigerants which help to supply air conditioning and refrigeration, when he noticed that some of his gas had turned into a white powder. After some testing, Plunkett concluded that the substance was heat-resistant with low surface friction, giving it the perfect properties for the many uses we see today. So pretty neat. I did not know what Teflon was, so pretty cool. Champagne is the next one, which I do plan, I think, here in a few, it will be coming out hopefully this weekend, so not long after this episode, because I'm trying to catch up on all my topics. But I do want to do like a breakdown episode of what exactly wine is, and describing like talking about what varietals are, and choosing a wine and what's in it and all that stuff. And I'm working on it because I really love wine. And when I started listening to Wine and Crime, one of my favorite podcasts, they used to, they still do now and then, but there's only so much you can talk about, like what wine is made of and all that stuff. But they used to have these really in-depth wine segments where they talk about like different wines and what they're made of and what varietals are and where they come from. And I always thought that was so cool. And one of the things I do want to talk about in that episode when I do it is like prices and why like wine might cost a lot, or like why like the wine I had last night was like $10. It was good though, like it wasn't bad, but it was only $10 for the bottle. So, but yeah, I think and I say this because champagne is very interesting. In that it's like, I think it's bourbon, which is the type of whiskey that you can only say it's bourbon if it's made in Kentucky. Well, champagne you can only say is champagne if it's made in Champagne French. Otherwise, it's Prosecco. So I think that's neat. I don't know why that's, I don't know if it's like a law or what it is, but I might look that up. I might look into that one. So anyway, champagne. Because they lived in such high altitudes, the monks of Champagne had plentiful access to all the best grapes. The problem, when the temperatures plummeted in the colder months, the fermentation process on the wine would stop temporarily, and when it began again in the spring, there would be an excess of carbon dioxide inside the wine bottles, which would give the wine unwanted carbonation. In 1668, the Catholic Church decided that it was time to handle the situation, and so they brought a French monk named Dom Pierre I know how to pronounce this, but my brain is not. Dom Pierre Perignon? I'm sorry. Over to Champagne to fix the fermentation problem. However, by the end of the 17th century, people had decided that they actually enjoyed the drink. And Perignon, I don't know. His task thusly changed into making the wine even fizzier. Eventually, he developed the official process for making champagne, known as the French method, crowning him the inventor of the celebratory sip. Pretty cool. And like I said, you cannot call it champagne unless it comes from Champagne, France. It's a whole thing. I love it. I think it's interesting, the weird rules we set for ourselves. And then, I think that's cool. So, man, I've got 3 more. So this is going to be a bit of a shorty episode. I can maybe make it to 40 minutes, but we'll see. But yeah, I love stuff like that. I think it's cool. Excuse me. Thank you. Vaseline is the next one, which I think I had heard of before as an accidental invention. Excited about the possibilities of what could be made with petroleum, 22-year-old chemist Robert Augustus Chesbrough decided to head to the town where the product had been discovered to play around with it a bit. Sorry. While there, Chesborough observed that the men drilling the petroleum would use a byproduct of the process on their skin to soothe and heal cuts and burns. He then turned this observation into the product known today as Vaseline, which is cool. The only thing I remember about Vaseline, I don't think I've ever actually used Vaseline, but the only I remember, if anybody has ever seen the movie Drop Dead Gorgeous, which is one of my favorite movies as a kid, the dance instructor has the girls who are in the pageant in the movie, without explaining the entire plot, put Vaseline on their teeth because it keeps their mouth open because they don't want to close their mouth and like taste the Vaseline, I guess. So yeah, that's the only thing I remember about Vaseline. Yeah, he's gross. But yeah, there you go, Vaseline, accidental invention. All right, so the next one is the ice cream cone. I love an ice cream cone, a waffle cone. Oh, the best. Today, ice cream fanatics have a choice between enjoying their treat in a cup or a cone, but that wasn't always the case. According to the stories, it wasn't until 1904 St. Louis World's Fair that someone came up with the idea to spin a wafer-like waffle into the shape of a cone. And this idea was birthed simply out of necessity when an ice cream vendor at the fair ran out of dishes to serve his ice cream in. The vendor next to him, named Ernest A. Hamwee, came up with the idea to shift his waffles into cones as vessels for the frozen treat. Oh, look at that. Look at the camaraderie there. That's nice. I like that. Ugh, needed a drink. Sorry. So that's cool. Love a waffle cone. I'm a huge fan. I also am not a huge fan because, I have a issue with getting sticky. So I don't like it when the ice cream gets all melty and gets on my hands. But if I can eat it quick enough that it doesn't do that, I like it. I also really like, what are those called? Drumsticks. You can buy them in bags at wherever, and they're like the chocolate-covered cone, or chocolate-covered ice cream with nuts and stuff in the chocolate, and it's like a hard shell, and then they have a cone, and the cone is coated with chocolate on the inside. Now, I'm not a chocolate person, but every once in a while, that hits the spot. Well, that sounds good. I might go get some today. Yeah, I might go get some drumsticks. Drumsticks are delicious. All right, the very, very last one, which is interesting because we had potato chips on here earlier, but now we have French fries. Did they even come from France? I don't think they did. Yeah, they came from Belgium. All right. The name may suggest otherwise, but it's actually the Belgians who claim to have invented this classic potato dish. According to local lore, the whole thing kicked off back in the winter of 1680 when rivers froze, leaving the fried fish-eating population without anything to eat. To help keep everyone fed, they decided to use potatoes instead, making sure to cut them into long segments before throwing them in the fryer. So, there you go. French fries. I don't know why they call them French fries, unless, just someone in France was or maybe someone went to France and had some. They were French fries. I don't know. I have no clue. I really don't. Foods are weird. I understand why they're called fries, though, because you do fry them. So, that makes sense. But, yeah, that was the last one. So, yeah, accidental inventions are fun. I think they're an interesting thing to think about because, there's so much in this world that we really take for granted, I think. I think, I think there's just so much that we could be more appreciative of sometimes. Or not. Don't hurt yourself trying to know everything about everything, but it's kind of cool to know, like, oh, the Post-it note was invented because some guy who wanted to invent a really strong adhesive actually invented a very weak adhesive. And then some other guy was like, hey, you should put those on like paper, and you should put that on like paper, and like, you know, people could use it as a bookmark. And then that became Post-it notes later on, so that's pretty neat. So yeah, I love it. I think it's great. I think it's a great little topic just to think about how things become what they are. I feel like a lot of really well-known things are accidental. I do. I think the best things can come out of accidents sometimes. So there you go. And I think that's where we're going to leave it for today. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. And if you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share it. It really helps me out. And I'm going to try to remember to do this at the end of each episode. But, you know, I don't necessarily need monetary support for this podcast. It's really just a hobby. But if you did want to provide like a little bit of support, I do have a Patreon. I will catch up on posting episodes there as soon as I can. But I'm also like trying to like use it as just a platform to post all my stuff and kind of keep a backlog of everything I post. So you'll see a lot of other content on there. But I do have a Patreon, and if you want to check it out, it is Wild Forest Productions, patreon.com, and the wild part is spelled WYLDE. So Wild Forest Productions. And yeah, if you wanted, the lowest tier is $1. It literally is the only tier I have. If anybody thinks it would be cool for me to add another tier, I've been thinking about doing like, because I don't have any merch or anything, but because I'm not popular yet, but popular enough to consider merch. But if anybody wants to, if they think of something that would, you know, be worth adding another tier, I thought about like topic suggestions being a thing, or just like topic requests as well, and just like a little shout out saying, hey, this person like requested this topic, and so that's what we're talking about, or something along those lines. I think it would be cool. So I've thought about doing that for $5, but I think if the podcast kind of takes off, which would be nice, I would love to do that for more like, you know, $10 a month, because like people, I don't want to make it too low just because like people come up with some weird topics, because I've gone out to my friends and been like, what should I talk about? And they've come up with some interesting ideas that I'm like, I don't know that that's worth talking about. But, you know, who am I to judge? If you want to hear about it, please feel free. I would love to chat with you about what is a very odd topic that you think about sometimes that you don't know a lot about, that would be fun to research. So, anyway, again, yeah, Wild Forest Productions. You can also find my Facebook page, which is that as well, and my Twitter account is Empress Wild, and then I also have my Instagram account. One of them is Empress Wild, which is just me posting things from my Etsy shop and my crafts and all that stuff that I do. The other one is Wild Forest Productions. Mostly it just has my TikToks on it right now, and then some little previews of my podcast. So I don't know what else to put on there, because I don't use Instagram a lot. But hey, if you go follow and support the show, I would really, 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 really appreciate it. Yeah, and again, if you want to follow things and you want to check things out, that's where I'm at. You can. I also have a Tumblr for Wild Forest Productions, but I know a lot of people don't really use Tumblr anymore. So yeah, definitely check those out if you want to have a chat or anything like that. I love talking to people about weird stuff. So anyway, thank you for listening again, and I will see you next time. Bye. Thank you for listening to I'm Already Looking It Up. If you're enjoying the podcast, please like and subscribe. If you'd like to support the show, you can go to my Patreon at patreon.com/wildforestproductions. Don't forget to check out all the social links below. Thank you!